not scared off by different personalities, people who are unconventional, people who've been maybe at times divisive or controversial. And he brings in Lane Kiffin because he wanted to go in another direction with his offense. And to me, one of the most amazing things about this story, about their pairing, is that Lane Kiffin really didn't run that style of offense either. They learned together and really sort of helped each other get better at what they were doing.
And, Chris, everyone knows Lane was out of work. He considered a couple of other things at the time, but what really pushed Nick Saban to bring him on board?
Well, first of all, he talked to a lot of people. Nick doesn't do anything without doing his homework. And everybody he talked to said, listen, if you're looking for a guy that's bright, who is someone that you can bring in and he will sort of go out and research this, a guy that is probably not going to be scared to take chances. See, that's the thing. A lot of people under Nick Saban probably, and Lane alluded to this, if they are those color the outside the lines kind of people, sometimes don't do as well with Nick Saban. And I think Nick, to his credit, knew that Lane Kiffin wasn't like that. And of course, they both, Jimmy Sexton's their agent, both of them. So I think he certainly played a big role in this. So I think that was, all a part of it, that he wanted somebody that maybe wasn't just like him, but would be bright enough to go out and help them transform the offense into what they are right now.
And Chris, what was that relationship like during those years in Tuscaloosa?
Pretty rocky at times, to say the least. And I think probably as their tenure wore on, that it got a little rockier. But, on the football field, and I think this is I love this part about it, is those two really sort of leaned on each other and helped each other. I mean, you mentioned it, Paul. Lane was out of work. It wasn't like he had a lot of people knock on his door. And I think hooking up with Nick Saban, in a lot of ways, helped resurrect his coaching career. And Nick Saban, as he told Lane, said, hey, this offense is a Lamborghini. We're getting ready to go off the cliff. I need somebody to help us get it where I want to get it. But I think they sparred. They sparred over things like, resting players. Amari Cooper, for instance, caught 124 passes that year. Nick Saban's MO is he's going to practice the same way in November as he does in September. So things like that. And I think Nick was, not real happy sometimes at Lane's organizational skills, spur of the moment type things, drawing up plays the night before the game, that kind of thing. And anybody that knows anything about Nick Saban knows he is as structured an individual as there is. And that structure, as far as Lane Kiffin was concerned, sometimes wasn't the way Lane Kiffin rolled.
What's really interesting is that Lane Kiffin, 3 years in, announced he was leaving to go to Florida Atlantic. He was going to be the head coach. He finished a couple of more weeks in Tuscaloosa. He did the semifinal game against Washington. And then, as everyone remembers, on that Monday, I believe it was New Year's Day, he gets fired. How does that happen, Chris?
Well, I asked both men about that. And Nick was pretty candid. He just said he felt like the focus after Lane took that job wasn't what it needed to be. He was trying to line up a staff at FAU, trying to help start with recruiting. Didn't feel like they were ready to play against Washington. I think they scored, 2 offensive touchdowns. Jalen Hurts did not throw the ball very well in that game. And I think this is something that maybe had been building. Some players and coaches had come to Saban about that. And Nick felt like the best thing for Lane was for him to go on and devote full-time his attention and focus to the FAU job. And they had Sarkisian there in the wings, who'd been there and been a big part of the offense all year long. So he turned it over to him. You're right. That's not something that most coaches would do. You wouldn't find that. I don't know if that will ever happen again in our lifetime. But you're talking about Nick Saban, who has proven over and over again he will adapt, he will evolve. Just when you think you've got him figured out, he'll go in another direction, like hiring Lane Kiffin. And, so I think that's the best way I could answer your question there, is it was just one of those things that had maybe been brewing for a little bit. Saban didn't like what he saw in that semifinal game and felt like it was time to cut ties. And Lane, to his credit, Paul will tell you, as he looks back on that time, that maybe he didn't handle some things as well. He didn't do some of the things he should have done, and he learned from it. And I think when you look now, it's his 2 years into his head coaching tenure at Ole Miss, he'll tell you he finds himself doing some of the same things and saying some of the same things that Nick Saban did when he coached under Saban.
Which is where I want to go now, Chris, because Kiffin admitted that here yesterday, that he's not the same coach. He doesn't seem like criticism bothers him to the degree that it would have in the past. What have you learned just watching Lane Kiffin over these years since he left Tuscaloosa, and especially seeing how he's handled success?
Well, I think success is a sort of relative term. He's been there 1 year, and I think we're probably all guilty of looking at what happened in year one and saying, boy, what a great year Ole Miss had. Well, the reality is they were pretty bad on offense, very bad, but they scored a lot of points, and they were entertaining and fun to watch play. See, I think the better judge, or the better way to assess Lane is this year. How does he do this year? In year number 2, outside of a COVID year, we find out a lot about what happens on Saturday. No, he's changed, and I think he's one of those guys that is not afraid to sort of draw on things, on people, and learn. And oftentimes when I talk to Lane, he'll bring up things that he did or said in the past and say, and looking back, that wasn't the way I should have done it. He was a part of 2 really different regimes. Pete Carroll at USC, who was more of a loosey-goosey, defensive-minded, obviously, head coach who let guys come in and sort of be who they were, and then the structure of Nick Saban. And what Kiffin has told me is he's tried to combine those 2 things as a head coach at Ole Miss, and feels like, having had time under both men, Paul, he's become a much more complete head football coach.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.